Previously on Minecraft, I finished enchanting all of my tools, getting them to the best that they can be, and ventured into the nether. I found a piglin bastion, getting me the netherite upgrade, and a nether fortress, getting me blaze rods and wither skulls. I also mined for some netherite to put my upgrades to good use. Anyways, let's get on with the video.
Here we are, back on Minecraft, and I think there's something I want to do today. Currently, the only build in this world is the SS Dino, so I want to change that. I don't want to completely rush my way towards the Ender Dragon, plus I need to collect shit tons of mending books, so I need me some emeralds. So today, I'm going to build a melon and pumpkin farm. But not just the one, god no, that's pathetic. I'm going to build a massive melon and pumpkin, each equipped with 12 fully automatic farms with their respective fruits, enough to trade with a haul of villagers to give me more emeralds than I'll know what to do with. I'm going to start with the pumpkin farm first. However, to do this, I was going to need a lot more villagers than I currently have. My trading hall that I want to build is going to house 32 farmers, each with a melon and pumpkin trade. While the melon trade is guaranteed, the pumpkin trade is not. So it might take a few villagers to get the trades I need for the trading hall, so I'm going to need a lot of them. So I farmed up my wood and wool, made some beds, and gave all my villagers bread so that they'd... frick. First on the agenda for building the pumpkin farm is clearing out a place for it to go. I want to keep these farms close to my base, as I not only want to build this world out from there, but I also want to keep the farms running whenever I'm home. The more the merrier in the end of the day. I decided to build it just on top of the hill, above my nether portal. However, that is home to my cows currently, so I cleared out the pig pen, because who the fuck cares about pigs, and moved the cows into their new pen. I then cleared away the remains of the butcher's house and placed in my schematic. With the exact position of the pumpkin farm decided, I began digging out the area where I'd be placing the farm. And here's where I ran into the biggest struggle I had with this project, being that I couldn't insta-mine stone. I can with a beacon, but without a beacon to my name, I had to slowly mine each individual block of stone, which was pretty mind-numbing to deal with. That alone made me decide that the next episode will be a boss rush, where the Ender Dragon, Wither and Elder Guardians will all be killed, and I will have every late game item. Until then though, my life was digging a hole. With the hole fully dug out, I began looking at the resources I'd need, which, yeah, I was gonna need a lot of things, some more expensive than others. I began crafting up some of the resources with what I had, however I quickly realised I was not gonna have enough. So I sat down and gathered all of the resources. I started with the acacia planks, which wasn't too bad considering I live right next to a savanna biome. I also had enough dirt from digging out the hole, so that was far from an issue. I needed quartz though, and a hell of a lot of it since I needed 480 observers. So a quick trip to the nether netted me what I needed. I was also going to need a hell of a lot of redstone, iron and gold, so I set out for the caves to gather me some more resources. I'm looking for fucking redstone and all I can find is diamonds. That didn't happen. With all of my ores mined and smelted, I began crafting up the resources I needed for the farm. I made the observers and pistons, which honestly took the most of my resources. From there, the resource collecting was a lot easier. Fuck me, I need me some farms, this was painful. I decided the next course of action would be to collect the dyes I need. Pumpkins are orange, great observation, and therefore I need orange dye. which I can either get from orange tulips or I can craft it from red and yellow dye. Red dye just so happens to be the easiest dye to farm, and yellow dye happens to come from one of the most common flowers. So I decided to just collect a bunch of dandelions and bone meal the hell out of my rose bushes to get the red dye. Because for some reason tall flowers are the only ones that you can bone meal for more. That should be how it is for all flowers. Fucking, it's like that in bedrock. The main block used in the pumpkin structure is concrete powder, which I need sand and gravel for. Sand I have loads of from when I built the SS Dino. Gravel on the other hand, I didn't have as much of. However, it's not exactly a difficult block to come across, so all I needed to do was go into the floor and dig me up some, which didn't take too long. From there, all I needed to do was craft up the orange concrete powder, which is thankfully only powder, so I don't have to convert it all. Basically all we need now is the colour blocks that are going to be used for the actual pumpkin build. I don't currently have a nether highway, so I had to go and find a mesa on foot, which of course I use chunk base for. I'm not wasting 20 years of my life searching for a mesa for one build. I farmed up some terracotta and came back with all the resources collected, aside from the pumpkins, which I'm building a pumpkin farm, so it's not exactly something I need to worry about collecting. So a bunch of my footage corrupted, because of course it did, but I thankfully have replays of me building this pumpkin farm. Yes, I have the replay mod for this video. I'm still learning how to use it properly, so forgive me if they're still a bit rough. One pumpkin farm just isn't enough for me though, so I had to build 11 more of them, for profits, you know. What unfortunately got lost in the corruption, however, was footage of a pillager patrol approaching my base. So I dropped the build for a second and decided, why not take the raid on? Do you mind, those are my fucking crops? I was just fucking sat there being chilling on my pumpkin farm. Do you mind?
Shit! There was two there!
Oh my god, no! I didn't mean to do that! Oh, which one? Oh. Are we done? Oh my god, my cat though! I didn't even get a chance to name it! We won the raid, but at the cost of one of my cat's lives. I guess it was the ninth, as it's not respawning. I put my rewards in the chest, including the 5 totems of undying, and made a grave for my lost cat. I've decided that these farms will be made in the cat's honour, as he was lost during the construction of them. Let's all have a minute of silence for Cat. Okay, back to the farms. I'm getting deja vu. With all of the farms fully built, I decided to AFK for an hour just to see how many pumpkins I'd end up with in just an hour. And I ended up with almost a full double chest of pumpkins in only 1 hour. Bearing in mind that some of the top stalks may have only just recently became fully grown, if fully grown at all, and yeah, this farm is busted. This, however, has given me enough to build a pumpkin structure, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. I wish my replay saved properly for this build, as it would have been so satisfying watching the pumpkin build up layer by layer. But I'm a baby when it comes to replays, so forgive me. I'll make sure they're working for next episode. And with that, my pumpkin farm is done. Guess I won't be needing this shitty thing anymore. It's not completely done, as I want to build a water canal that funnels the pumpkins into chests in a villager trading hall. So I'm going to do that. Oops. Yeah, I accidentally built a mob farm. Something tells me I'm going to be doing that a lot in this world. I lit up the place and started building up the channel where my pumpkins would flow into. The idea is that instead of the pumpkins entering the chest that I put them in now, they'll go through an automatic dropper, which will drop the pumpkins into a pool of water below that will flow the pumpkins into a place that is easier to access. I started placing the water, replaced all of the chests with automatic droppers, and gave them all a chest to send their pumpkins into. Though, in an hour this chest will be filled to the brim, so I was gonna need a lot more than just one chest. The melon farm still needs construction, but I think I want to break up the monotony of essentially building the same farm again with the construction of my villager trading hall. This hall housed 32 villagers, each with a double chest on top of them which will store the pumpkins and melons. This will give the overflow of fruits more storage to work with. I went with stone bricks and oak logs for the walls and spruce for the floors. The pumpkins were already overflowing, so I really needed the storage. I already had a villager on a boat from a bit earlier when some of them managed to escape, so I decided that he would be my first farmer for the trading hall. I also wanted to zombify and cure these villagers because doing so would lower the prices I'd need to trade with them. The farms produce so many melons and pumpkins to where it wouldn't really matter if we did this or not, but I like being able to max out the trays with a single stack of pumpkins instead of needing two. Plus I know the whole comment section and their godmothers would tell me I could cure them for lower trades if I didn't do it, so I'm gonna do it. To get a zombie villager, you need to let a zombie kill a villager. I know, shocking, right? So I trapped a zombie, which I gave an item so it wouldn't despawn, and slept through the night. However, turns out the zombie had called in one of its friends.
No! Fuck!
Thankfully they were right next to water, so putting them out wasn't an issue. However, when my zombie villagers started to sing, I accepted that it was done for.
I fucked it.
Except for the fact that, for some reason, zombie villagers can breathe underwater. I'm not sure if this is a glitch, some weird anti-drowning mechanic with infected villagers, or if they're just secretly Squidward. But zombie villagers can apparently breathe underwater. Go figure. I built a staircase down to seafloor and managed to save the zombie villager. Thank fuck for that.
Okay, panic over.
Now I just needed to cure the zombie villager. For this, I'd need a fermented spider eye, crafted with a spider eye, sugar, and a brown mushroom. I started panicking thinking I didn't have mushrooms, but I found some in my chest. I must have found them in the nether or something, I don't know. I also needed a golden apple, which was far from an issue either. While I was letting Mr. McScuba Diver cure, I started building a chamber where the zombie would go, which I linked to the villager breeder via a rail system so I could easily take the villagers out of the breeder. My zombie despawned, because of course it did, so I needed to get another zombie. In the meantime, however, my villager cured, so I moved him to the new trading hall. It was, as villagers typically are, really fun and entertaining to work with.
I love working with villagers. Where the fuck are you going?
Why? Why is it like this? You fucking all.
I did it. Anyways, I got myself a zombie, called it your mum, and then realised it couldn't pick up items, so I couldn't give it a weapon to kill villagers faster with. So I tried again, got another zombie that could actually pick up items, called it your mum the second, and started getting villagers for my trading hall. Like I said earlier, however, the pumpkins for emeralds trade is not a guaranteed trade, and what makes it worse is that it's on the second level of trading, meaning that I couldn't see whether the villagers were going to have the right trade until they were already locked in, which meant a lot of lives were lost in this process. Not to mention that... Alright, so lowest thing, she's a hit on top, that's brilliant. These villagers spend about 5 to 7 business days to refresh their trades, which made the process a whole lot longer than it needed to be. Which means I had a lot of fun. So cue the montage of me dealing with villagers because, no word of lie, it took me 5 hours to get all of them to behave themselves.
Five in a fucking row. Where the hell are you going? No.
If anyone ever complains about the inhumane ways the villagers get treated, I just want to remind them that that was 5 hours of my life that I'm never getting back. And I'm sure they wouldn't behave any better if I gave them a proper home, so it's hard to feel guilty. Anyways, with all of the villagers fully moved into their new home, I removed the rest of the railing and finished up the decoration of the trading hall, as there was a couple of missing blocks that needed filling out, plus the exterior. Now that the villager trading hall is done, it's time to move on to the final thing I want to do in this video, which is building the melon farm. Looking at the two farms next to each other alone makes me really want to get this done. They already look so good, even if they are just cubes. Now, the farm I'm building is basically exactly the same as before, except with melon seeds instead of pumpkin seeds, so there's not much new to say about the process. So instead, I want to do the same thing I did when I built the SS Dino, which is tell you the story of the farmer and how him and his pumpkin and melon farm came to be. This is the story of Farmer Joe. Joseph Starr grew up on a farm with his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Starr, and his brother, Michael. The family grew up working in a farm for their boss, Farmer Kenny, who ran the farm. Kenny was a stern man who was strict on having the most hard-working, efficient workers to maximise profits. Each of the members of the Starr family were assigned different roles, with Mrs. Starr and Michael tending to the animals, and Mr. Starr and Joe tending to the crops. Halloween was Joe's favourite time of the year. His work on the pumpkins he was growing finally paid off after so long. People from around the world came over just to get their hands on a pumpkin for their decorations, and they always sold well. Because of this, Joe and his father would receive high praise from Kenny for the work they did with the pumpkins every year without fail. Until one day, the pumpkin production began decreasing in quantity. While the melons, potatoes, carrots and other crops continued to grow, when October was coming around, Joe was getting worried. He had a few pumpkins, but due to the reputation that he had built for the pumpkins growing at Kenny's farm, he knew that customers would be clawing at their chance to get a pumpkin. And with a lower number of pumpkins growing that year, Joe knew that Kenny would be annoyed. The week of Halloween rolled around, and Joe was more scared of his boss and what he had to say than the spirits and zombies a part of the event. Mr. Starr told his son that it would be better for the two of them to be honest with Kenny than to try and hide it. So the two made a daring move and told Kenny that the pumpkins weren't growing as much this year around. Kenny was furious. He was annoyed at the little amounts of pumpkins, but most his frustration was towards the Starrs for not speaking with him about this matter months prior to Halloween. He threatened to fire the entire Starr family if the two didn't get the pumpkin patch sorted out before next Halloween. Kenny also made the decision that Mr. Starr would be taken away from the fields to work on marketing, as the other crops needed selling to compensate for the lack of pumpkins, whereas Joe was left to tend to the fields on his own. So Joe headed back out to the fields, all alone in the cold of the autumn air. He began collecting up all of the fully grown crops, desperately trying to think of a way to please Kenny. One by one, the pumpkins would be loaded into his tractor trailer and taken back to Kenny's barn ready to sell. Eventually, however, Joe would find something he didn't expect. Alongside all the fully grown pumpkins, Joe found a full-size pumpkin. However, it looked identical to the ones in the early stage of growth. Confused by this, Joe decided to leave it alone and collect the rest of the pumpkins. He took the pumpkins back to Kenny and told him about the ungrown pumpkin he found. Kenny brushed it off as nothing more than a late bloomer and gave Joe an underwhelming thanks for his work collecting the pumpkins. Over time, however, the pumpkin grew. The pumpkin was over 3 meters in height when Kenny began to notice it. Even at this height, however, it looked unripe. Kenny, however, still brushed it off, as people didn't want pumpkins outside of Halloween night, so a pumpkin with this size wasn't worth maintaining. He sent Joe out with a pair of gardening shears and told him to cut the stalk to stop it from growing. Joe walked up to the plant, towering over him. He went around the back of the pumpkin, shears in hand, however he couldn't bring himself to cut the stalk. Curiosity got the better of him. He just had to know how big the pumpkin would grow if he let it. So, against the wishes of his stern boss, Joe only pretended to cut the stalk and walked back with the shears. However, his plan would be cut short, as Kenny's next request was to break down the pumpkin and put it into compost. Joe was put into a sticky situation where he couldn't tell his boss that the plant was still alive, but now he was forced to break it in a way that would be unnoticeable if he didn't do his job. But Joe didn't want to give up just yet. He had a plan. He asked Kenny if he could have some help from his family to transport all of the pumpkin into compost. Due to its size and volume, he wasn't going to be able to do it himself. Kenny reluctantly agreed, allowing Joe's parents and Michael to help him out. Joe brought his family out to the pumpkin, away from Kenny, and told them about the pumpkin. It's then that he had noticed, in that short time that he had gone to talk to Kenny, the pumpkin had grown at least another meter. With the pumpkin growing at an alarming rate, Joe and his family decided to wait out by the pumpkin for the day. The pumpkin kept growing. It got to around 7 meters in height before Kenny came out to the pumpkin and found that the pumpkin hadn't been touched. He was furious, but Mrs. Star stepped in. She mentioned that the world is filled with many unfed mouths, and with this pumpkin they could make a difference. Even selling the pumpkin in chunks for fractions of the amount of a normal pumpkin, they could still make millions. With this revelation, Kenny reluctantly agreed to let the pumpkin grow, ignoring the fact that Joe didn't cut the stem. Many years later, and many harvests later, the pumpkin stem produced large pumpkin after large pumpkin, making the farm millions. And after Kenny's passing, Mr. and Mrs. Star took over the farm and became known worldwide as the farm with the giant pumpkins. The Melon and Pumpkin farm is now complete. I'm really happy with how the two came out, but I'm honestly more happy about this video finally being done, as it was 16 hours of footage I had to painfully edit. And let's just say it wasn't easy, as I only have 16 gigabytes of RAM. If you know, you know. The next episode will be a boss rush of the 3 bosses, as I said before, which hopefully won't take as long as this did. Thank you all for watching. If you liked it, hit the like button and share with a friend if you think they'd be interested. And until next time, goodbye.